When my sister humiliated me in front of her fancy colleagues, calling my repair shop a joke, I stood silent until her CEO walked in and revealed a truth that turned the room upside down. My name is Victoria Hayes, and I was the family disappointment. At least that's what my younger sister Emily liked to remind everyone, especially when she had an audience. The last time she did it, we were at her company's cocktail party on the rooftop of some uptown skyscraper. She wore a tight red dress, all elegance and ambition, and I stood in the corner with a root beer in hand, wearing a simple green blouse and slacks that had seen better days. "Victoria fixes microwaves," Emily said, smiling wide. Loud enough for her colleagues to hear. Well, not just microwaves, also air fryers, blenders, toasters, whatever's broken. She can unscrew it. People laughed. I didn't. I've been called worse. I've had quieter insults cut deeper. But something about the way she said it, like I was a joke, a punchline, hit me different that night. I was just about to leave when the double doors swung open and in walked Sarah Thompson, CEO of one of the fastest growing tech firms in the state. She scanned the room briefly. Then her eyes landed on me, and to everyone's surprise, including my sister's. She smiled and said loud and clear, "Victoria, I was hoping I'd see you here." Emily went silent. The room did too. And in that moment, I realized sometimes your reputation walks into the room before you ever have to say a word. I wasn't always the family disappointment. Once upon a time, I was the shining star, the one with the top grades, the college scholarship, the law school admission letter pinned to the fridge like a trophy. Our parents were proud. Emily back then still had braces and wide eyes that followed me everywhere. She used to say, "I want to be just like you." That didn't last long. When I was 22, everything cracked. It started with Mom getting sick. Dad tried to hide how serious it was, but I knew I deferred my first semester at law school to stay home and help. Then Mom passed quietly, like she just slipped away. And suddenly I wasn't a future attorney anymore. I was the one folding hospital bills and cooking frozen dinners for a father who'd forgotten how to speak. Emily didn't handle it well. She threw herself into school, into dance, into pretending everything was normal. I didn't blame her. We were just two girls trying to survive in a house that echoed. I never did go back to law school. The scholarship expired. I got a job at a front desk to pay the utilities. And when Dad's grief turned into drinking and the house started to fall apart, leaky faucets, short circuits, broken AC, I did what I had to do. I learned how to fix things. You'd be surprised how empowering it feels to hold a voltage tester and figure out what's wrong with something no one else can make work. I watched videos. I read manuals. I made mistakes and burned out 2 hair dryers before I got it right. But eventually, fixing things stopped being just about the house. It became my livelihood. I left the front desk job and opened a repair service. Just me. A secondhand workbench and a big green haze fixes it sign I painted myself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And every time I handed back a working toaster to an elderly woman who didn't want to buy a new one, I felt something law school never gave me. Peace. But our family didn't see it that way. At Thanksgiving dinners, I was the other daughter, the one who fixed wires and appliances while Emily dazzled everyone with her job and corporate strategy, her sleek outfits, her perfect LinkedIn page. She worked for Sarah Thompson, the kind of boss who made headlines. Emily talked about Sarah like she was royalty. I didn't mind being invisible at those dinners, but Emily, she made it hard to stay invisible. She'd say things like, "At least I didn't waste my degree tightening screws." Or, "Some of us have clients who don't live in retirement homes." She said them with a smile, the kind that dares you to react so she can call you sensitive. I didn't bite. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that over the years I'd quietly grown a client base. One of them, through a third-party logistics partner, had a name I recognized, ST Tech Solutions. That's right, Sarah's company. They sent us busted devices from their warehouse team. No one from the top ever contacted me directly, but the pay was solid, the work steady. It helped me save up, helped me upgrade equipment, helped me hire a part-time assistant. I never bragged, never name-dropped. I just kept fixing what was broken. But the more I stood still, the faster Emily sprinted ahead, at least in appearances. She posted about conferences, promotions, her perfect boss babe life. And the more she climbed, the smaller she seemed to think I'd become. And I let her think that because I learned a long time ago when someone wants to look down on you, correcting them isn't your job. Time has a way of straightening out perspective better than any argument ever will. I just didn't realize how quickly that lesson would come knocking. The thing about quiet success is that no one really notices it. Not at first. My shop wasn't flashy. It was tucked between a laundromat and a tailor in a faded brick building on the west side of town. The sign out front was hand-painted and a little chipped from the weather. Inside, the floor squeaked and the coffee was always lukewarm, but it was mine. I built it up piece by piece, literally. I refurbished shelves, installed my own lighting, even wired in extra outlets when I started handling more industrial repairs. People came in for broken remotes and left with stories. I got to know their names, their grandkids, the way their lives paused when something stopped working. I never advertised much. Word just spread. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing myself as a failure. I woke up, worked with my hands, paid my bills. I didn't owe anyone anything. Not a boss, not a committee, not a parent asking when I'd go back to real work. I fixed things that mattered to people. Heirloom radios, grandmother's fans. One client brought in a coffee machine her husband had used every morning before he passed. She cried when I gave it back, running like new. Not because of the machine, because it brought something back she thought was gone. That meant something to me. And on the back end, through a logistics partner, we began getting bigger contracts. Bulk batches of malfunctioning units, mostly from distribution centers. We never got names, just codes, invoices, serial numbers. Then one day, while filing away a service order, I noticed something stamped on a delivery slip. ST Tech Solutions. I stared at it for a long time. Sarah Thompson's company. I hadn't realized that our little operation had ended up supporting her supply chain. It was not direct. We were likely the subcontractor of a subcontractor, but the devices kept coming. We fixed them on time with precision, and they kept paying. I never told Emily, not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't matter to her. Nothing I did ever mattered to her unless she could belittle it. Meanwhile, she was rising fast. Promotions, panels, podcasts. She became one of those people who gave career advice on LinkedIn like she'd invented ambition. I saw her in an online article once smiling in front of a skyline titled, "Women to Watch in Tech." I watched her. All right, I watched her forget where we came from. Sometimes I wondered if she remembered that I was the one who taught her how to set up her first laptop. That I stayed up late reading financial aid forms so she could apply to college. That I took a job I didn't want so she wouldn't have to drop out when Dad lost his insurance. But that's the thing about memory. People only keep the parts that make them feel proud or powerful. And the older I got, the more I stopped needing anyone's version of the truth but my own. I had employees now. 2 part-timers, a retired electrician named Tom, and a high school kid named Ethan who wanted to learn. I paid them well. I paid them on time. They respected me. And I ran my little shop with the kind of pride Emily wouldn't understand. We were never in the same room for long anymore. Family holidays became smaller. Our dad moved to Nevada and stopped asking questions. I sent him birthday cards. He sent back photos of sunsets and quiet. We were all just drifting. So when Emily called one afternoon and said, "You should come to our company's cocktail mixer. It'll be fun," I was surprised. I asked, "Why me?" She laughed. "Why not? You never come to these things. It's time you met some people who might inspire you to level up a bit." That should have been the first red flag. But I said yes. Not because I needed her validation, but because I had a feeling that time was about to straighten out some perspectives, and I was ready to let it. I showed up 10 minutes early. Emily's company had rented the rooftop of an upscale midtown building, the kind of place with string lights, imported wines, and glass panels instead of rails, so you could see the whole city twinkling beneath your heels. People floated around in expensive suits and sharp heels, laughing with the kind of practiced ease that comes from networking more than living. I wore a navy dress I'd had for years. Clean, simple, nothing flashy. I did my makeup the way I always did, just enough to look awake. I brought a small gift bag for Emily with some locally made coffee she liked when we were younger. A peace offering, maybe, or maybe just a habit I hadn't let go of yet. When I walked in, she didn't notice me at first. She was surrounded, her voice the loudest in the group, hands animated, posture perfect. I stood off to the side, sipping club soda, watching her perform. Eventually, she spotted me. "Victoria," she said, drawing attention. "You came." Heads turned, and that's when I felt it. That pause. That moment when a room evaluates someone and files them under not important. Emily gestured toward me. "Everyone, this is my sister. She's in hardware repair." The way she said it, it was soft but deliberate, like she was tossing me a label and daring me to correct it. I smiled. "I run a repair and refurbishment shop." "Yes." One of her coworkers blinked. "Like for computers, among other things?" Emily laughed. "She's being modest. She can fix just about anything with a plug." Then to her friend, "She's like a walking warranty." People chuckled. I didn't. I nodded, still smiling. There was a sharp edge in my chest, but I kept it buried. Emily wasn't finished. She turned to a man in a gray blazer. "Jake, remember I told you about my sister? She's the one who fixed Mom's old blender instead of letting her upgrade. I swear Victoria would rather fight technology than embrace it." More laughs. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Not because I didn't have a comeback, but because nothing I said would change anything. Not in that moment. So I turned toward the table, pretending to study the hors d'oeuvres. That's when the elevator chimed. The rooftop went quieter. Not silent, but still. A shift in atmosphere outstepped Sarah Thompson. She wore a navy pantsuit, hair slicked back, face unreadable. She had that presence, that energy that made people stand straighter when she walked in. People cleared a path instinctively. She didn't pause, didn't scan the crowd for Emily. She walked straight toward me. "Victoria," she said, holding out her hand. "I didn't expect to see you here." I shook it firmly. "Neither did I," I replied. Emily's voice behind me cracked. You two know each other." Sarah turned. "Your sister is the reason your logistics team has been able to maintain a 97% equipment turnaround. You've been using her services for 2 years. I assumed you knew." The silence that followed was exquisite. Emily blinked. I thought that was a third-party contractor." "It is," Sarah said. "But Victoria's shop is the one they sub to. She solved problems your team couldn't even diagnose." She turned back to me. "We've never met in person, but your work speaks volumes." "Thank you," I said, my voice calm. People around us shifted. No more forced laughs, no more small talk. Emily stood still, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. I didn't rub it in, didn't gloat, just offered a polite smile because I wasn't there to win. I was there to witness the moment the truth walked into the room wearing a pantsuit and a name badge. Sarah excused herself to greet others, and I turned back toward the snack table. My root beer hadn't even warmed in my hand. Emily approached slowly, her voice lower now. "Why didn't you say anything?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Would it have made a difference? She didn't answer, and for once that was enough. After that moment, something in the room shifted. Not just for Emily, for everyone. People who had ignored me earlier now approached with cautious curiosity. They asked about my shop, the kind of work I did, how I got started. I answered simply without embellishment. The truth didn't need decoration. It just needed space to stand on its own. Sarah passed by again later, this time with a drink in hand and a quieter tone. "You've got a good eye," she said. "I've looked at your diagnostics. Your team solves things our engineers give up on." "I appreciate that," I said, I have good people. She smiled, then leaned in slightly. I value precision and loyalty. If you ever want to skip the middleman, let me know. She handed me a card, sleek and embossed. I tucked it into my purse without looking at it. I'll think about it. She nodded and walked on. Emily stood about 10 feet away watching. When I made eye contact with her, she didn't look away this time. I walked over slowly. No point in dragging it out. She was gripping the rim of her wine glass like it was anchoring her. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. She searched my face, maybe looking for anger or forgiveness or an opening. I didn't mean to embarrass you, she added. Yes, you did, I said. Not harsh, just factual. You just didn't expect it to backfire. She flinched a little. I let the silence stretch. Look, she said, I've worked hard to get where I am. You dropped everything and just settled. I didn't understand it. No, I said calmly. You didn't look closely enough to try. She blinked. I didn't settle, I added. I rebuilt. She swallowed hard. I guess I always thought you gave up. I nodded. A lot of people did. That's the luxury of distance. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it because it was the truth. Sometimes people build their stories about you around the pieces that serve them best. And when you grow in silence, it confuses them. It threatens their version of how the world is supposed to work. Emily glanced around, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you come tonight to prove something? I actually laughed. Just once, quiet and short. No, I came because you asked. She looked down. I didn't press her. She was already carrying enough embarrassment for both of us. And honestly, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. Victoria, she said, I really am sorry. I nodded. Good. Now do better. She nodded slowly. I could see the gears turning. Whether she'd change or not, that was her journey, not mine. I said goodbye a little while later. No dramatic exit, no parting shot, just a quiet farewell. As I rode the elevator down, I thought about Sarah's card. I still hadn't looked at it. I didn't need it to mean anything more than it already had, because that night wasn't about opportunity or exposure or vindication. It was about balance, about watching the scale tilt back to where it should have been all along. People say revenge is sweet, but this wasn't revenge. It was just truth. Undeniable, unpolished, and overdue. And sometimes that's more powerful than anything else. I didn't take Sarah's job offer. I still have the card. It's in a drawer in my shop, tucked beneath a stack of receipts and old instruction manuals. Every now and then I look at it, not because I regret saying no, but because it reminds me that I didn't need to be discovered to matter. Some people climb ladders, others build solid ground. I chose the ground. My shop is still running, busier now. The exposure helped, sure. A few new clients came in because of the party, and word spread a little further, but that's not what I hold on to. What stays with me are the quiet wins. The 80-year-old man who brings me his late wife's antique mixer and thanks me with tears in his eyes. The single mom whose only laptop I managed to bring back to life before her online midterms. The teenage assistant I hired last summer who now wants to start his own repair truck. That's the legacy I care about. Emily and I talk more now carefully. Not like before. Not like sisters who braid each other's hair and share secrets, but like people who are trying. People who've seen each other clearly for the first time and are still learning what that means. She hasn't mocked me since. Sometimes she even asks for advice. Small things like budgeting or how to fix her thermostat. I answer, not because I need her validation, but because I've let go of needing anything from her at all. What I've learned more than anything is that respect doesn't arrive with applause. It comes in the quiet after people finally stop talking long enough to listen. I never raised my voice. I never corrected the room. I never shouted, "Look at me." But when the moment came and truth walked through the door, I didn't flinch. And neither did my worth because it was never missing, just underestimated. So if anyone ever asks what I do, I tell them the truth. I fix what's broken. And I don't just mean appliances. That night, Victoria learned that her worth didn't need applause or validation from others. By quietly building her own path, she discovered that truth speaks loudest when you let it walk in on its own. Have you ever had a moment where the truth flipped the script? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you proved them wrong. When I walked into her sister's lavish wedding alone, the whispers and smirks of judgment followed her every step, until a single bow from a powerful stranger silenced the room and changed everything. My name is Alicia Thompson, and I walked into my sister's wedding alone, completely alone. Not because I didn't have someone to bring, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to stand tall without anyone shielding me. That moment, that walk, it was like stepping into a courtroom where everyone had already decided I was guilty of being a woman past 30, unmarried, and too successful for her own good. As I entered the grand ballroom, heads turned, mostly for the wrong reasons. I caught whispers. I saw the subtle smirks from my sister's new in-laws. The women leaned toward each other, eyes scanning my dress, my hands, and the obvious absence of a ring. One of them muttered loud enough for the people behind her to hear. Poor thing, still can't find anyone to bring. Emily, my sister, didn't even glance my way. She was too busy posing, all teeth and diamonds next to the groom and his very proud family. And I wasn't part of the display. I was the afterthought they hoped would blend into the back row. I could have left. I should have, maybe. But something in me said to stay, to face every mocking stare without flinching. Then something strange happened. An older man seated at the center table stood up slowly. His hair was silver, his presence unmistakably commanding. I recognized him from headlines. William Carter, the groom's uncle, a man with more corporate power than most governments. He looked straight at me and then he bowed. A full deliberate bow right there in front of everyone. And in that instant, every sneer, every whisper, every judgment in the room stopped cold. Growing up in the Thompson household was like living on a stage you never auditioned for. My sister Emily was the star from the moment she could walk. Blue-eyed, golden-haired, effortlessly charming. She was the kind of child relatives fawned over at barbecues, while I, with my serious eyes and endless questions, was gently told to let Emily have her moment. I learned early that being quiet was easier than explaining myself. My world was numbers, ideas, inventions. I took apart the microwave when I was 10 and built a self-timing oven by 14. While Emily practiced cheer routines, I studied advanced calculus under my blanket with a flashlight. My parents didn't discourage me exactly. They just didn't understand me. "You'll grow out of that tech stuff," my mom said once, right before grounding me for skipping a school dance to attend a robotics camp. Emily was rewarded for being pretty. I was tolerated for being strange. By the time we reached adulthood, the gap between us had grown into a canyon. She married young, first love, big white wedding, house in the suburbs. It didn't last. Neither did the second one. But the third, Nathan, he was a different tier. His family owned land, business chains, and connections that turned heads at the country club. Emily saw in him not just love, but legacy. And as always, our parents were thrilled. They hosted dinners, gushed to neighbors, printed new family portraits. My name came up. I was invited to the wedding because, I am her sister, but I was warned. Don't make it about you. As if I ever had. I booked a flight, RSVP'd for one, and cleared my schedule. I didn't have the time, but I went. Not for them, but for myself. The morning of the wedding, my mother called just to remind me not to wear anything too loud or too businessy. "You're not presenting at a summit, Alicia?" she said, laughing. "This is a family event. Try to blend in, okay?" I smiled through the phone. "Sure, I'll do my best." Of course, I didn't blend in. I wore black, clean lines, no sparkles, my hair in a low knot, minimal jewelry. I looked like myself, and I suppose in a room designed to spotlight Emily, looking like myself was already too much. I arrived on time, alone. I caught the looks, some surprised, some amused. Emily's new in-laws gathered near the altar, sipping champagne and throwing glances my way. One of the aunts nudged another and whispered, Is that the one who's single? With the same tone one might use for unemployed or recently paroled. I didn't flinch. I've built startups under pressure no one here could fathom, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from being alien in your own family, like you're the ghost at the banquet table. Emily walked past me during the pre-ceremony photos. She didn't even stop. "Hi, Alicia," she said quickly, not waiting for a response. So I found my seat quietly alone, just like they expected me to, except what none of them expected was William Carter. The ceremony itself was standard, overproduced, expensive, curated for social media. Nathan and Emily said their vows beneath a floral arch the size of a carport. There were drone cameras, a string quartet, and a flower girl flown in from some family friend's child modeling agency. It was the kind of display that screamed perfection right down to the guests selected for symmetry in the aisle seats. I stayed quiet, clapped politely, smiled when expected. It wasn't until the reception that the real show began. The venue had been transformed into a glittering evening affair. Chandeliers, signature cocktails, and monogrammed napkins everywhere. The guests were assigned to long banquet tables arranged like corporate hierarchies. I was placed near the back, flanked by two distant cousins, who both seemed shocked I hadn't brought a +1. "I figured you'd have someone by now," one of them said, stirring her martini with a gold cocktail pick. "A woman like you all accomplished." It was meant as a compliment. The pause between her words made it anything but. Emily was seated up front with Nathan's family. Her in-laws hovered around her like she was a prize they'd just secured at auction. The mother-in-law, Patricia, had a face that didn't move when she smiled, likely the result of a good surgeon. She hadn't spoken to me directly, but I caught her glancing over several times. Once she leaned into another guest and said, "She's the sister, right? The one who's always working." They laughed, not loudly. Just enough. I excused myself, headed toward the bar. I was halfway through a ginger ale when I saw Emily walking toward me. Her smile was tight. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "Make sure you're okay." "I'm fine. You seem, I don't know, distant." I blinked. "Emily, we haven't had a real conversation in 5 years." She gave a little laugh, the kind that begged forgiveness without saying the words. "Well, you're here now. That counts." I almost replied, almost asked if she even knew where I lived now. What I did, but I didn't. What would be the point? She was already gone before I could say anything. I turned back to my table. That's when I heard them again. Nathan's uncle and cousin sitting not far behind me. "Pretty, but cold," one said. "You can tell she's one of those women who marries her career. Probably expects us to applaud her for showing up alone," the other added, chuckling. I stood still. For a moment, I considered walking out. I had my coat. My car wasn't far. I could disappear, leave them with their champagne and their self-satisfaction. I owed no one here anything. But then came the pause, that subtle shift in the air. From the main table, a chair scraped back. Slow, purposeful. I turned. William Carter was rising to his feet. He wasn't flashy like the rest of the family. No polished cufflinks, no exaggerated tan, just a tailored navy suit, silver hair swept back, and eyes that belonged to a man who saw everything without needing to comment. The room quieted. He took a step forward, past Nathan and Emily, past Patricia, who looked suddenly unsure, and then right there he bowed. A clean, full bow, formal, unmistakable, the kind of gesture reserved for people you respect or fear. Gasps. A few camera shutters clicked. Someone dropped a fork. I didn't move. I couldn't. William straightened and walked to me. "Miss Thompson," he said, voice low but clear. "It's a privilege to finally meet you. Your keynote at the Chicago Summit changed how we handle tech transitions across 3 subsidiaries. I owe you a thank you." I felt every eye in the room shift, recalculating, reweighing. The woman they had written off was now being honored by the most powerful man at the wedding. I smiled then. Small, reserved, deliberate, Thank you, Mr. Carter, I said. It's mutual. For the first time all night, the room wasn't laughing. It was listening. William Carter didn't return to his seat right away. Instead, he gestured to the nearest waiter, requested a glass of club soda, and asked if I would mind walking with him for a moment. I said yes, not because I was flattered, but because I could sense the ripple that moment had caused, and I wanted it to settle exactly the way it should. We stepped out onto the venue's stone terrace, away from the staring eyes and whispered questions. William moved slowly, but with the calm assurance of a man used to people waiting for him. I meant what I said in there, he began. I recognized you the moment you entered. That's funny, I replied, because most of your family didn't seem to. He chuckled. They wouldn't. They only know what they've been told. Emily's family, correct? They've always struck me as focused on surface value. I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. William continued. 3 years ago, your firm launched the integration model for decentralized AI data recovery. My company, Hudson Group, was set to invest $180 million in a competitor. But your presentation in Chicago changed everything. I blinked. That wasn't public information. It wasn't. But I make it my business to know who's actually changing the world behind the scenes. I studied him. His eyes weren't just watching. They were weighing. I assume you didn't mention this to Nathan, I said. William smiled faintly. Nathan barely knows how to check his own email. He's a decent enough boy, but he inherited everything. He's never built anything. You, Miss Thompson, built from the ground up. That phrase stuck with me because he was right. While Emily curated her image, I was building systems, pitching to investors, eating cheap takeout in rented offices. I was up at 3 a.m. writing code with no health insurance and no guarantee the next round of funding would land. I didn't just survive the market, I shaped parts of it. But to my family, that wasn't impressive. It wasn't visible. It wasn't photogenic. Back inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed. People who had spent the evening dismissing me now shifted in their seats. A few even stood when I returned, unsure of the proper response. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Nathan was pale. Emily was furious. She approached as I sat down. What was that about? She hissed, the polite smile frozen across her face. I looked up at her, calm, cold. That I said was someone recognizing what you never did. Her jaw clenched. You couldn't let me have one day, could you? I almost laughed. One day, Emily, you've had a lifetime. All I did was show up. She didn't answer. She turned and walked away, heels clicking too fast, bouquet trembling in her hand. The speeches began shortly after. Toasts, jokes, anecdotes. I stayed silent. William remained seated at my table, offering quiet remarks now and then, most of which went over the heads of everyone else. Then came the final toast. Nathan's father. He rambled through the usual love, marriage, family, but at the end he made the mistake of glancing toward me. And of course, he said, raising his glass, to all the family members who joined us tonight, even those who prefer the boardroom to the ballroom. There were a few chuckles. William didn't laugh. He set down his drink and stood once more. I'd like to add something to that, he said. It takes very little talent to inherit wealth. It takes even less to marry into it. But the woman sitting beside me tonight, Alicia Thompson, has done neither. She's created value where there was none. She's earned respect in rooms none of you will ever be invited into. So, if we're raising glasses tonight, mine is to her. The room went silent again, and this time no one dared look amused. When William made that toast, I didn't smile. I didn't look around for validation or acknowledgement. I kept my gaze steady on the table in front of me, one hand resting on the stem of my glass, the other still. There's something more powerful than being praised. It's being understood. And in that moment, I knew someone in this room finally saw me. But it wasn't my family. They still shifted in their seats, avoided eye contact. Emily looked like she wanted to scream but was too afraid to ruin her wedding photos. My parents were frozen, both clinging to polite expressions that didn't reach their eyes. They didn't know whether to feel proud or ashamed. I could see it. My father trying to remember what I'd told him 5 years ago about my business. My mother recalling that article someone forwarded her, but she never read. They had spent so long reducing me to a cautionary tale. Don't be like Alicia. She's too cold, too ambitious, too alone that they couldn't recalibrate fast enough now that the world was applauding. But I wasn't there for their applause. Truth is, for years I had carried the weight of wanting them to see me, wanting my mother to brag about me like she bragged about Emily's handbags, wanting my father to ask me about my latest project instead of whether I had finally met someone. I wanted them to care, but on their own terms, not out of obligation or embarrassment. Eventually, I stopped trying. I worked, I traveled, I failed, succeeded, failed again. I lived a life with edges, with risk, with meaning. And in doing that, I stopped waiting for their approval. This wedding was supposed to be another chapter in their curated family story. The beautiful daughter marrying into wealth, the other one attending in black like a ghost from a different book. But I'm not a ghost. I'm the architect of my own story. And if they couldn't see that, I was done handing them the blueprint. Later that evening, after the music resumed and the noise returned, my mother approached me. Her steps were hesitant. The way you walk across a frozen lake you're not sure will hold. You look beautiful tonight, she said softly. Thank you, I replied. She paused, then added, we didn't know about all that. About Chicago, about Mr. Carter. I know, I said. We're proud of you, Alicia. I met her eyes. Why now? She blinked. Excuse me. Why are you proud now, Mom? Because someone powerful said I mattered or because you finally believe I do? She didn't answer, just reached for my hand and squeezed it as if that would undo decades of silence. I let her hold it for a second. Then I let go. As I turned to leave the reception, Emily caught up with me. I didn't know he knew you, she said. Uncle William, I had no idea. You never asked, I replied. About my life, my work, anything. That's not fair. No, it's just accurate. She looked away. You always made me feel like I wasn't enough. I tilted my head. Funny, you and Mom always made me feel like I was too much. That was the last thing we said to each other that night. I left alone just as I had arrived, but this time not a single person laughed. I didn't go back inside. While the party stretched late into the night, people dancing, glasses clinking, laughter echoing in that manufactured fairy tale, I stood outside beneath the darkening sky and watched the lights flicker across the windows. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one who had left the stage before the show turned tacky. A few guests passed by me on their way to the valet. A couple of them nodded overly polite. One man, a junior executive from a firm I'd acquired years ago, approached me nervously and said, I didn't know you were that Alicia Thompson. I just looked at him. You still don't. He walked off with his wife, fumbling an apology. William Carter came out a little later, his hands in his coat pockets, his tie slightly loosened. He didn't speak for a moment, just stood beside me. The silence was surprisingly comfortable, more honest than anything said in that room. I wasn't trying to make a scene, he said finally. I know, I replied. You were trying to make a correction. He smiled. Some illusions deserve to be broken. Then he offered something I didn't expect. A partnership, not just a courtesy or favor, but a concrete opportunity. He told me about a new initiative he was launching. He wanted my insight, my name on the founding charter. And more than anything, he wanted someone who didn't just know how to build, but how to rebuild from nothing with vision and clarity. I didn't answer right away. Not out of pride, just reflection. Because for the first time in a very long time, I realized I had a choice. One not shaped by resentment, but by self-respect. Eventually, I said, let's talk Monday. He nodded once and left. That was it. No fanfare, no fireworks, just mutual respect, sealed in quiet. I drove home alone that night with the music off and the window half down. The wind was cold against my face, but I welcomed it. It reminded me that I was real, that I was here not because someone allowed me to be, but because I carved out a space that couldn't be ignored and never needed their approval to exist. I never got the kind of family that clapped for me at graduations or showed up at product launches. But that night, I stopped needing them to. I stopped trying to earn what they were never willing to give. And maybe that's the lesson I didn't know I needed to learn. Sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when the world finally applauds you. It's when you realize you don't need them to. And that freedom, quiet, unsentimental, absolute, was the most valuable thing I had ever claimed for myself. As Alicia stood outside the glittering venue, the cold night air sharp against her skin, she realized the weight of her family's approval had been a chain she'd carried too long. Their silence had never defined her worth. Her strength came from building a life that didn't need their applause. What's a moment that made you realize your own strength? Share your story in the comments below. Let's inspire each other. At my sister's wedding, her father-in-law dismissed me as a nobody, until my speech revealed I co-founded the tech company he desperately wanted to buy, and his face drained of color. My name is Erin Parker, and at my sister's wedding, her father-in-law looked straight past me like I didn't even exist. He brushed by without a nod, without a glance. Just that air of quiet dismissal that men like him have spent a lifetime perfecting. I stood there in a tailored suit, drink in hand, knowing something he didn't. See, Harold Grant, the man so proud of his last name, he probably signs it in gold ink, had spent the last 6 months trying to buy out a tech company he didn't realize I co-founded. A company his own business relied on. A company I built from nothing while raising my sister from the ashes of our old life. But Harold only saw what he wanted to see. A nameless, titleless nobody. He saw the surface. That's what men like him do. And frankly, I was fine with that because in a few minutes after I got called up for an impromptu speech, I would introduce myself. And when I did, everything about the way he looked at me would change. His posture, his expression, his grip on the wine glass. Some people don't like surprises. Harold. He turned pale, and I just smiled. They say the hardest part of loss is the silence that follows. That's true. But no one tells you about the noise that comes before it. The ring of a phone at an hour it should never ring. The static in your ears when someone says the words you swore you'd never hear. For me, it was the sound of my college advisor saying, "Erin, there's been an accident. My father was gone." Just like that. One moment, he was planning a trip to visit me and my younger sister, Abigail. The next, I was driving back to a hometown that already felt foreign without him in it. I was 22 and exhausted from finals. Abigail was 17, 1 week shy of her high school graduation. We had no mother in the picture. She'd left years ago to reinvent herself with a new family. So it was just us. 2 orphans, 1 car, and a future that had just crumbled overnight. The funeral was a blur. What came after was brutal clarity. Debt. So much debt. My father had been self-employed, and somewhere along the way, things must have spiraled. Loans, missed payments, business liens. He must have been trying to protect us from it, shielding us until the very end. But once the obituary printed, the creditors came knocking hard. They took everything. The house, the car, his workshop. All we had left was the small suitcase of clothes I'd packed for spring break. My scholarship covered tuition, but rent, groceries, Abigail's tuition. We were on our own. That night, after the last relative left and the door clicked shut, I remember sitting on the floor with Abigail. She was crying, knees tucked under her hoodie, and I realized no one else is coming. I was the only adult left in her world. So I made a decision. I would finish school, get a job, any job, and keep us above water. I took on work in the campus cafe, picked up evening shifts as a courier, and slept maybe 4 hours a night. There were days when I went to class still sweating from hauling boxes up 4 flights of stairs, But every dollar I earned stretched across 2 mouths, 2 lives. I lost my girlfriend somewhere along the way. She was kind, but she needed more than voicemail apologies and forgotten date nights. I let her go. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't have enough of myself left to give. People talk about building character, like it's some polished process. Mine was forged in overdraft fees and bus transfers. It was built when I looked at my little sister and knew she still deserved a future, even if I had to burn mine to light the path. After graduation, I didn't celebrate. There was no cap toss, no party photos, just a quiet sigh and a job offer at a mid-sized firm doing back-end operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid, and that was enough. I moved us into a modest one-bedroom apartment. Abigail took the bedroom. I took the couch. She started community college while I juggled spreadsheets and client calls. Every night, I cooked us dinner, even if dinner was just rice and eggs. And on weekends, I caught up on sleep and broken shifts. But even in that grind, I kept one eye on the future. I enrolled in online courses, marketing, automation systems, SaaS platforms, anything that could sharpen my skills. I didn't know what opportunity would come, but I swore I'd be ready when it did. It came one rainy Thursday evening. I got a message from Caleb Ortiz, an old classmate who remembered my business instincts. He and another friend were building a tech tool for automating back-end systems. He needed someone who could handle operations and pitch to early clients. I was hesitant. It sounded unstable, but it also sounded alive, and I hadn't felt alive in years. So I said yes. My life split in two. From 8 to 5, I wore slacks and answered to middle managers. From 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., I lived in code bases, flowcharts, and pitch decks with Caleb. We built out of coffee shops and borrowed server space. Some nights, I passed out with my laptop still glowing on my chest. Money was tight. Arguments happened. One of our co-founders left after a brutal 6-month dry spell. Caleb and I stayed, barely. Then came the breakthrough. A corporate client piloted our tool and slashed their processing time by 40%. They told 3 others. Suddenly, we had demos booked, inboxes flooded, and feedback loops we barely had time to process. A review on a major tech blog gave us our first real wave of inbound interest, but even then, I didn't quit my day job. I'd learned too early how fragile stability could be. I saved every spare cent. I handled customer service tickets, invoicing, and system bugs in between lunch breaks and late nights. Caleb became the public face. He worked, smiled at cameras, gave TEDx talks. I was the man behind the curtain. And I liked it that way because while others chased titles and LinkedIn clout, I chased something else. Peace of mind. A life where Abigail didn't have to count every dollar at the grocery store. A life where her future wasn't defined by what we lost. She got into a state university on merit. I paid every bill on time. We had backup savings, health insurance, working appliances. That felt like luxury. No one saw how much it took, and I didn't need them to. But that silence, the choice to stay unseen, meant people like Harold Grant could meet me and assume I was small. And that was fine by me because I'd rather be underestimated than misjudged. I'd rather be invisible than falsely praised. But life has a way of bringing things full circle, especially when your sister decides to get married. It was a Tuesday night when Abigail called. I had just collapsed onto the couch, still in my work clothes, eating cold leftover pasta straight from the container. She sounded breathless, excited, but also strangely hesitant. "Erin," she said, "I have something to tell you." I assumed it was about school, maybe a project or an internship. I didn't expect her next words. "I'm getting married." My fork paused in midair. "You're what?" "To Nathan," she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "We've been seeing each other seriously for a while now, but I didn't tell you because I didn't know how." I blinked. I'd met a Nathan once in passing, but I'd never heard her mention anything serious. "Abigail? Married? That's huge. Are you okay?" She laughed nervously. "I'm more than okay. I'm happy. I just needed to tell you before things move further. He wants to meet you." That caught my attention. Anyone who wanted to marry my sister had better want to meet me. I was her brother, yes, But more than that, I was the one who stayed. I'd played every role in her life that mattered: parent, tutor, emergency contact, friend. If someone wanted to step in now, I needed to look him in the eye and measure the shape of his soul. We arranged to meet that Friday, just a casual dinner, nothing formal. I offered to cook. I still remember opening the door and seeing Nathan standing there, flowers in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, and a grin that tried a little too hard. Something about him felt familiar. We exchanged pleasantries, sat down, and talked. He was polite, well-spoken, clearly adored my sister. But there was something in his last name that tugged at me. Grant, I said aloud, turning it over in my head like a coin. Any relation to Harold Grant? He paused for a fraction of a second too long. He's my father. That's when it clicked. Harold Grant was one of our biggest enterprise clients. Not just that, he'd been actively trying to acquire our platform for months. His emails always came laced with thinly veiled offers, the kind that suggested he thought he was doing us a favor by showing interest. He was a businessman through and through. Sharp suits, sharper tone, and a reputation for crushing partnerships just to own the scraps. He was all over the industry blogs. He wasn't evil, just dismissive, transactional. And now here I was, sitting across the table from his son. I kept my face neutral, my tone even. I didn't mention the company, didn't bring up business at all. This was about Abigail. If Nathan was decent, I'd find a way to make peace with the rest. Later that night, Abigail pulled me aside in the kitchen. You went quiet for a while there. Everything okay? I nodded. I'm just surprised. You really love him. I do, she said. He's not like his father, Aaron. He's kind, steady. He listens. I studied her face. She wasn't pleading. She was glowing, and she never glowed easily. Okay, I said at last. Then I'm in your corner. Weeks passed. Wedding planning took over her life. I offered to help where I could, but kept my distance from the formalities until the family meet and greet. It was held at an upscale country club, all white tablecloths and waitstaff in black vests. Abigail asked me to attend, and I said yes, more for her than for them. I met Harold face to face that day. The moment I walked into the room, his eyes found me. He took me in quickly, shoes, suit, posture before looking away. When we were formally introduced, he offered a limp handshake and said, "Oh, you're just her brother." I assumed her father would be here. I stared at him. Our father passed away a long time ago. He gave the briefest nod of acknowledgement before moving on. Then came the inevitable question. What is it that you do again? There it was, that investor instinct sniffing out pedigree. I work corporate, I said. True in a sense. He didn't hide his disinterest. Didn't even try. And that was fine. I didn't come to impress him. But part of me, a small part I usually kept buried, whispered, "You'll regret that." I told Caleb about the encounter later that night. He just laughed and said, "The universe has a weird sense of humor." The weeks flew by, and soon the wedding day arrived. Abigail looked radiant, the kind of beauty that didn't just come from the dress or the makeup. It came from knowing you were loved and loving back without fear. She gripped my hand before walking down the aisle and whispered, "Thank you for everything." I just smiled. At the reception, I stayed out of the spotlight, chatting quietly with guests. Then I saw Harold approach with 2 other men. He walked past me again, didn't even pause. It was deliberate, calculated, and I felt nothing. Nothing but quiet certainty. He still didn't know who I was. Not really, but he was about to find out. I wasn't planning to speak. There was no note in the program, no cue for a brother of the bride speech. I'd already played my role. Walked Abigail down the aisle, stood tall in family photos, raised my glass during toasts. That was enough. I didn't need the spotlight. But someone must have added my name to the speaker list. A member of the catering staff tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're next. 2 minutes." I blinked. Next for what? She gestured toward the stage. Speech. The mic's ready. I could have declined. Should have, maybe. But something in me, some mix of fatigue, pride, and memory, told me not to. This was my sister's wedding. The closest thing I had to a daughter was entering a new life, and the room still didn't know who I was. So I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the front of the room. Good evening, I began, my voice steady. My name is Aaron Parker. I'm Abigail's brother. That caught their attention, I continued. But I wasn't just her brother growing up. After our father passed unexpectedly, I became her guardian. I was 22. She was 17. We had no other family. Our mother had long since moved on. The room shifted, glasses were lowered, forks paused. I was finishing college when it happened, and I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when she needed food, a roof, tuition. So I worked day shifts, night shifts, weekends. I slept less than I'd like to admit. I lost friends. I lost someone I loved. I glanced at Abigail. She was already crying. But we made it, I said softly. She made it because she's brilliant and brave and has a heart that forgave me for the moments I wasn't enough. A quiet rustle moved through the crowd. Even Harold across the room had turned to face me. I also want to say this, I added, my voice lifting just a bit. During those years, while trying to survive, I helped build a startup, a software platform. Some of you may even use it. That line landed harder than I expected. I saw heads tilt. A few guests exchanged glances. My co-founder, Caleb, over there, joined me on a leap of faith. We started with borrowed code and busted laptops. Now we support some of the biggest firms in the country. I let that hang in the air. And while I didn't come here to talk business, I share it because it's part of the story. The same story that led me to this room, this day, this moment. I turned toward Abigail and Nathan. I'm proud of you, both of you. You found something rare. Trust, partnership, joy. And I'm honored to stand here and say, you're ready. With that, I stepped away from the mic, nodded at the applauding room, and made my way back to my table. But I didn't get far. Harold Grant intercepted me like a shadow emerging from the wall. He extended his hand, smiled tight. Aaron, wasn't it? That was quite a speech. I shook his hand, firm but not eager. Thank you. You're the co-founder of that company. I nodded. Yes, that company you've been trying to acquire. His smile faltered just a fraction. I had no idea, he admitted. Why didn't you say anything when we met? I held his gaze. Because I wanted you to see who I was when you thought I was nobody. He didn't reply. Didn't need to. I gave him a polite smile. Enjoy the evening, Mr. Grant. Then I walked past him, back to Caleb, who raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. We clinked glasses. The tension dissolved. The rest of the night, smooth, joyful. Abigail danced like a woman free of old shadows. Nathan was gracious. Harold stayed civil. But something in his eyes had changed. Less arrogance, more calculation. That was fine, because I hadn't said anything untrue, and I hadn't said everything either. We never sold the company to Harold Grant. Not out of spite. Not even because of how he treated me. Truth is, the offers were impressive on paper. But I've learned to look beyond numbers. His interest wasn't built on mutual respect. It was built on the assumption that everything and everyone has a price. And I don't do business with men who only learn your worth after they read your resume. So Caleb and I stayed independent. We scaled with purpose. We didn't need a buyout. We needed space to grow on our terms. Ironically, Grant Industries still licenses our platform. His employees file support tickets through the same portal as everyone else. We respond quickly, professionally, always polite, never personal, strictly business. Nathan never brought it up. He respects boundaries, and more importantly, he respects Abigail. Over time, we've built something close to trust. I don't hold his last name against him. He's not his father. He never was. Abigail is thriving. She has peace in her life now. Real peace. She teaches, gardens, volunteers on weekends. And she smiles in a way she didn't when we were younger, when everything felt like it might fall apart any second. That smile is what I fought for. That's the return on my investment. Sometimes people still assume I'm just the guy in the background. Quiet, unremarkable, and I let them think that because I know the truth. The ones who dismiss you when you're silent are the same ones who will scramble to respect you once someone announces your title. But by then, their respect means nothing. True respect shows up when no one's watching. It's not a reaction. It's a choice. Harold's biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was assuming that being unseen meant being unimportant. But I've never needed the spotlight. All I needed was to know that my sister would be okay. And now she is. That's more than enough for me. If there's one thing this whole journey has taught me, it's this. You don't rise by being loud, by forcing people to see you. You rise by standing firm in who you are, quietly, steadily, and with dignity. When people finally notice, let it be on your terms, not theirs. Because at the end of the day, what matters most isn't who applauds you. It's who you protected while no one was watching. Aaron realized that true strength lies not in demanding recognition, but in quietly building a life of purpose and dignity, letting actions speak louder than titles ever could. What's a moment when you were underestimated? And how did you prove them wrong? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear how you turned the tables.